Good morning, everyone. I'm Hamsarika, Assistant Professor from Department of Electronics and Instrumentation, Dr. Ambedkar Institute of Technology. It's my pleasure to give a brief introduction about the speaker, Dr. S.B. Banaprashan. Dr. S.B. Banaprashan graduated from Siddhartha Institute of Technology, Tumkur, and pursued MTech and PhD at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He has nearly 30 research publications in international and national journals and conferences to his credit, and also co-authored a textbook on linear integrated circuits, concepts, and applications. He has received a research grant of 35 lakh from VGST and DST. He is a member of ISSS, ISOI, and immediate past chairman and EXACOM member of IEEE Sensor Council, Bangalore section chapter. His special interests are in the domains of instrumentation technique, analog circuit design, embedded systems, optical fiber communication, human body area networking, and amorphous semiconductor. He is a recipient of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Memorial 2018 Outstanding Teachers Award from ISBR of Bangalore Educational Trust. He is currently serving in BMS College of Engineering, Bangalore, as professor in Department of Medical Electronics. Totally, he has a 30 plus year of passionate experience in teaching and research. Thank you. Now I request Dr. Bhanuprashan sir to take over this session. Thank you, Ananda.
Yes, madam. Thanks you for the kind introduction. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it's shared. Yeah.
Okay, my voice is also clear. I can go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Ravi sir, for the kind opportunity, and madam for the nice introduction. I'm more than happy to share my little knowledge about some of the latest trends and the basic concepts of developing what are called as wearable sensors for the purpose of healthcare. I'm Bhanu from BMS College of Engineering. So nice talking to all of you. And I'm sure all of us have the background of biomedical instrumentation, but just to set the tone, I'm trying to define what healthcare is all about. It's about maintaining or improvement of the health condition by various ways and means, like prevent a disease or diagnose a disease, then treatment, help people rehabilitate or help somebody recover or cure a disease or an illness or an injury of both the physical and mental impairments in people. I think most of us are from the biomedical engineering background, so I just defined what is healthcare all about, what we are dealing, coordinating the various works with our students and medical industries and hospitals for that matter. And having defined what is healthcare all about, so let me tell you how my presentation has been outlined today. I'll talk on only one slide about biomedical instrumentation, and again for the reason that I'm setting the tone for that. Then I'll talk about sensors, then move on to wearable sensors. I'll define what wearable sensors are all about. So then the applications of wearable sensors for healthcare, then what are the enablers and what are the typical features of wearable sensors. Then I'll try to give you a list of what are all the typical physiological parameters that people have been successful at measuring using wearable sensors. So then wearable sensors are based on body fluids and not on the blood sample. So what are the typical body fluids that are used to develop wearable sensors? I'll talk about. So then what are the different components that will make up a wearable sensor system? I'll talk about. And of course, I'll do all this in the background of some 3-4 very interesting examples of the recent literature work that people have reported to design and develop very novel wearable sensors for the purpose of healthcare. So typically I do my presentation in two parts. This is my first part. And in the second part, I try to move from the wearable sensors to the connected devices, wherein, for example, if I'm wearing 10 sensors that will monitor my physiological condition, I'll see if I can connect them so that they can talk to themselves and also talk to a router outside. So that becomes a wireless body area network or a medical IoT systems. And I'll talk about two applications that are very specific as to why are we moving from wearable sensor to the connected devices. So then what are the typical impacts, applications, and advantages of making medical IoT systems. Then I'll just take an example of a end-to-end IoT system just to be in the line of totality, and also throw some light on what are the typical communication protocols used in wearable sensor technology, and why security is important, and what are the different ways and means in which we make things secure. See, once you go to the IoT concept, we are in the public domain, so it's very important to secure our data, our privacy, and so on and so forth. So I'll also be talking about that. So friends, my presentation will be in two different headings. The first part on wearable sensors, in the second part on, how do we move from wearable sensor to connected devices. Yeah, let's go ahead. We know what is biomedical instrumentation all about. It's the application of the engineering principles and the design concepts to medicine and biology for healthcare purposes. And already I have defined what is healthcare all about. It is just to make the people and animals, live much better, than what they are living probably. And we are all very familiar with the two broad categories of making this possible, using what are called as the invasive applications or using the non-invasive applications. We know the difference. In invasive, we pierce the body to get the signal or to stimulate something, etc. So many of the invasive applications will look at the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, or even the locomotor system for that matter. And the non-invasive applications typically do with the biophysical or electrophysiological parameters like EEG, EOG, ECG, EMG, and even the kinematic signals like what are the pulse rate, heart rate, respiration, facial expression, blood pressure, joint movement, and so on and so forth. And also we look at all these biochemical kind of parameters measured in the human body, like the volatile gases, electrolyte concentration, the metabolites, the bacteria, or the drug, or the dopamine, tumor markers, others. This is happening, as we have understood, in various domains of biomedical instrumentation. Probably you'll be amazed by the end of today's presentation that we can, simplify the application of that by developing very novel devices in which a person can wear the device and go about his normal life, but still all these parameters are being measured, right? So that's about biomedical instrumentation. And it's very simple to know that biomedical instrumentation can be implemented at different levels. This particular picture shows the typical measurement that happens in a kind of a setup. What we have as the laboratories where we give our samples and various tests are done routinely using suitable scientific and analytical instruments to come out with the various quantities. So that is a different application. In the second application, as you can see, there is a continuous monitoring of physiological parameters, but the patient needs to be in what is called as an ICU or a CCU, etc. Probably you can get a feel of the kind of equipment that are connected to and the hundreds of parameters that are measured for this particular subject in a clinical setup or in an ICU. Well, these are two distinct applications in which I just go and give my sample and get the report, or I'll get admitted in hospital and all these things are happening. But assume I'm a subject who is not this critical, nor I need to go to a clinical setup and give my sample for a test, but I would like to go about my normal life, but still there are some parameters that are to be measured in me so that I can lead a normal life. For example, if I'm an epilepsy patient, and that needs to be detected, maybe early detection or taking care of me when I'm on the roads or in the KR market or Majestic. So what is that I can do? I can neither do this nor do this because I want to go about my normal life, but still I should have some sensors fitted onto my body so that all my physical, important, vital or physiological parameters are being monitored only to give better healthcare for me or to increase the comfort of living. So therefore, we are moving from the typical sensor that are used here or the sensor used here to the sensor that can be deployed on the human body or even an animal body, but enable him to go about his normal routine life and that should be undistracted. So that's the purpose of wearable sensors, right? Let's move on to the topic of wearable sensors. We all know about sensors. We would have used sensors in various, ways and means and capacities. Sensors are devices that will sense any, physical variable and give a signal that is analogous to that. In other simple terms, we say sensor is a device that converts one form of energy into another more usable form of energy. For example, a piezo will convert pressure into a charge, or an LVDT will convert displacement into a suitable EMF, or a thermocouple will convert temperature into something else, etc. Or a biosensor can measure what is the amount of pathogen present in a particular patient. Yeah. Now, when you can wear them and go about, they become wearable sensors. But the operating principles have to totally change, and the form factor of the device has to be less. And we will come across different set of performance characteristics for wearable sensors over and above the sensors what we are familiar with, right? Yeah. So I've defined what wearable sensors are. To define what the technology is all about, so wearable sensing technology is a category of devices owned by subjects that allow continuous physiological monitoring with reduced manual intervention and at low cost. In fact, I'm trying to correlate what I have defined now with reference to the previous slide in which I showed some beautiful pictures. There you were required to go to the hospital or a diagnostic center and get yourself tested in a hospital setup. But here, very less manual intervention. We give you very low cost devices. You can wear it, go to your office, go to your school, go to your college, go to your village, etc. But still your parameter could be monitored and communicated to an expert or a medical data center. So that's what is wearable sensing technology all about. Just look at this. This picture illustrates what are the typical physical signals or the physiological biosignals that are being measured. People have measured the pressure, the motion, the tactile, the touch, the vibration, thermal signals like fever or excessive fever called as hypothermia, and electrophysiological signals like the brain wave, all the EEG signals, then the cardiac activity, the muscle movement, and your EMG, EEG signal using a cap. And you can have a smart band to measure something else, and you can have some one lead ECG that can pick up things. You can have a smart textile, you can have a skin thermometer, or you can have a smart watch. Friends, please appreciate this. All the devices that I'm wearing and I'm going about my normal life. Once that is done, they will remotely communicate this device, this data through a suitable wireless communication protocol, about which also I'll brief in towards the end of my presentation, to a remote medical service, either for self-diagnosis or for somebody to take care of his health, or for a medical database, etc. So to summarize, the person's physiological parameters are measured and communicated to another remote location. So now imagine the importance of security. I'll talk about that towards the end of my presentation. Yeah. So I've defined what is wearable sensor technology all about. Now let's move on. The first thing I would like to address is why is that people have thought of wearable sensors application? Well, there are lots and lots of applications, but I would like to touch upon two very, very distinct applications of wearable sensing technology, just to create some interest in the participants or the students whom I teach. The two important things I would like to talk about are the medical emergencies and the rural healthcare. And thanks to the advances in signal technologies, microelectronics, and communication technologies, we have been able to develop very, very novel wearable sensing technology devices for this particular purpose. We all know what are medical emergencies. So the health parameters can be measured and monitored remotely and transmitted to a nearby service station, like it could be a hospital, a police station, or a freelance service center, or etc. in the case of an emergency. We know what are emergencies. For example, for epilepsy patients, or for the elderly care, or for people with cardiac issues in which you would like to detect the symptoms of a cardiac arrest in that golden hour detection, or the case of rehabilitation in which post-surgery somebody is slowly getting back to his normal life. The doctor will never have the time bandwidth to go to the each home of his patient and see how he's recovering. If you can make a wearable device, the subject is at his home getting back to his normal life, and the doctor or the practitioner is able to guide him very properly and enable that he will recover very, very fast. So that's one very important application of wearable sensing technology. It is like, he is about his normal life. He has a device that will detect all these medical emergencies and communicate to any doctor. For example, let me highlight the epilepsy patient who will have what is called a SAD, that is sudden death that can happen, just like what can happen in a cardiac arrest. If that can be detected half an hour before, life could be saved, right? So that's where wearable sensing technologies are coming into picture. So that's the first application, which is a very distinct application of wearable sensing technology. And the second application is addressing the rural healthcare problems. We all know that scarcity of specialist doctors and medical facilities is what is there in the rural areas, mostly in all the developing countries like ours. And there, sorry to say that at present only 60 to 65% of the Indian population live in rural areas, and unfortunately only 10 to 20% of the physicians work in those areas and with very very inadequate facilities, right? So more than me speaking much about that, this picture says it all. This is a simple primary healthcare center in a typical village in our country, and you can see, crowds of people waiting for something. Please understand, it is not they're not in a queue to get something big, but maybe to get a dose of, paracetamol, or some small thing being tested, etc. So that's the kind of situation that we have in our rural areas. In fact, there will be hardly any specialist physicians in there. Only non specialist physicians will be there, and patients traveling distance is critical in conditions could be very very large, because they have to reach to a primary healthcare center that is say 5 miles away, 10 miles away, etc., etc. So usually in all these cases the subjects are taken to the healthcare center in broad dead situations, which is very very unfortunate, right? So how do we address these particular two problems that I have told you? One is to address the patient in case of medical emergencies, and in the second case, to do better service, healthcare services to be given to people who live in the rural areas where all these vital facilities are absolutely missing, right? What is that we can do? So the possible solutions to address these very critical, challenges in our healthcare setup are to have very smart wearable sensors with integrated transmitters, right? If I can wear a smart device that can detect the epilepsy that is happening to Bhanu and communicate it to somebody else, that is fantastic. Or if I can have a wireless sensor network or the wireless body area network in which I will be monitoring more than say 4, 5, 6, 10 different parameters that are put on a sensor network. So I'm well connected to the public domain, through which I'm well connected to my specialist doctors, and the better services will be available. And of course, we can also use the booming Internet of Things. In this context, we call it as medical IoT system. So therefore, I thought to make the talk very interesting, in the second part, I'll talk about the medical Internet of Things. So that are the solutions. So as I've highlighted against the two very distinct applications of wearable sensing technology, they're also used, in consumer electronics, medical prosthetics, artificial skin, then soft robotics, therapy, drug delivery. There is no end to the extent to which wearable sensing technology has been developed. In fact, if you look at what has happened in the US market, from year 2014, it was around $25, million. By 2025, it was expected to have an exponential rise. Sorry, I don't have the actual figure. And please understand, this is probably pre-pandemic data. And if you look at what has happened now, it is even humongous. Probably I'll try to show you a device that has been developed to make an early detection of the COVID also, right? So that's what I'm thinking of. Now, I'm sure, all of you have, one question at the back of your mind. Is it easy to implement this? I'm very sure that there are huge number of challenges. So let me, declare that the discussions on the socio-economical challenges involved in implementing these solutions is out of the scope of this particular talk. I'm not here to talk about what are the challenges to do this, say in my village called Sompura, or in your village called Tarikere, etc., etc. So I'm not here to talk about that. There are huge number of challenges, but with the the Green India concepts coming up and Make in India concepts of coming up, I'm sure at least in the coming few decades, if not a great improvement, at least some delta improvement or a good amount of improvement is quite possible even in our developing countries setup, right? So let us all work towards in this direction and make some contribution, however small it could be, to make our India much better. Yeah, or the whole globe for that matter. Today we live in global villages. If we can make a solution that can be employed elsewhere, that is even fantastic. So let's all work in that particular direction. Now, having defined what wearable sensors are, the devices that we wear on our bodies and go about. So these are the typical body fixed positions in which we use the wearable sensors, maybe on our head for EEG signal, and on the chest and shoulders to pick the EEG signals, or on the this belly part to monitor the digestion and say functioning of your other digestive related organs, or on the wrist to measure various things, or on this particular knees position, or on the foot also for various things. So these are the typical positions where the accessibility of the biomedical signal is quite good. And please understand one thing: the user should also be comfortable in doing that. We never put them at a place where is inconvenience to go about his normal life. So that is also another biggest challenge when you make a wearable sensor. And the typical signals that are measured are your, EEG caps and EMG bands, or the ECG chest strap. So it's a chest strap that you can wear and go about, and his ECG is still monitored, or a cap that you can vary, or a band that you can wear on the wrist and still his EMG is being monitored. Or we can have optical sensor in the form of wearable glasses, contact lenses, and cameras. Or I can have a very smart wearable textile or a belt that is still monitoring my vital physiological parameters. Or I can have chemical sensors like the electronic skin or a textile on wristbands, smartwatches, body fixed sensor, and so on and so forth. I'm sure by the end of today's presentation you will have some knowledge about at least some 4 to 5 different type of devices that people have developed very successfully. And now I have been talking about the purpose of wearable sensor is to give better healthcare to the people. What are the related applications? It could be for wellness, in which we monitor the activity and fitness, or for safety, wherein you can do fall detection of the elderly people at home, or the seizure detection in people with problems in the cortex regions, or to detect a cardiac arrest, what is called as a golden hour to save a life. Or it could be for a rehabilitation purpose, where people are trying to get back to their normal life, to monitor their therapeutic exercises very remotely. In fact, today I'm going to give an example of a jacket that you can wear, and the posture is monitored very remotely for a rehabilitation application. Or it could be even for disease management, to follow the treatment efficacy, to see how the disease is progressing or how the improvement is progressing, etc. You can do disease management, and also you can predict disease or an early detection to monitor the early signs of various physical parameters. So that means whatever we intend to do as good biomedical engineers are possible to be done using wearable sensor technology, right? You can always read this particular nice article by Nahid, who is talking about the whole list of things for biomedical disorders and etc. It is published in Biomedical Journal in the year 2018, right? Yeah, hope you're all with me and trying to enjoy the new things that I'm trying to tell you about the impact of wearable sensing technology on the improvement of healthcare of the people. Yeah. Now, what are the typical features of wearable sensors compared to the other sensors, what we are all familiar with? I'm sure whether you're in instrumentation or biomedical instrumentation or electronic communication, would have used some or the other kind of a sensor. This is a very, very smart, fit band, what all of us vary. We say, it can measure the blood oxygenation level, it can measure our footsteps, etc., to monitor our health better. So that is at one end of it, which is a very smart device. But there are other devices also. So let us quickly try to list the different features of the wearable sensors. They can be worn on the human body or on the animal body. They have to be flexible, because the human body is flexible. They should become an integral part of the human body, so that you can go about the normal and routine life, and you are able to monitor the physiological parameters of the particular subject. And they can diagnose the health condition. They can support safe, comfortable, and healthy living of the particular person. And they can even determine the patient's metabolic state by monitoring a couple of parameters which are very well related, and tell how healthy is the patient. And they may redefine the doctor-patient relationship. The way our online education has redefined the relationship between teacher and students. Similarly, adopting this wearable sensors or medical IoT system definitely will do all this. In fact, it will make it better. Because we talk about online consultation, we talk about online medicine delivery, etc. I mean, there is nothing that is impossible thanks to the way the internet has gone into our lives, even in our day-to-day life for that matter. It will also reduce the difficulties of obtaining health services, because remotely you can ask for assistance, seek help, and take guidance, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure it will have a very, very good and positive effect on the healthcare services, and it can give very vital and timely information at very affordable cost. You can have a device that is purchased at 2,000 rupees, but can save a life. What else do you need other than this? These are some of the wearable sensors that are being developed. You can see that you can wear it in your palm, or you can wear it at your fingertips, or this is graphene based wearable sensing device that is at the fingertips. They are so flexible that this particular subject can hold a ball the way he can hold the ball with his fingers, etc., etc. And this is a saliva analyzer, in which we use the body fluid called as saliva to monitor the glucose, which will have some correlation to the blood glucose and so on and so forth. So friends, wearable sensor technologies are available today already. They have been deployed, and they make us live better. But one important thing I'd like to say, that is, let me tell you, they can only complement the traditional measurements and assessments and cannot replace them. I mean, you should not read me wrong and assume that once we have wearable sensor technology, we can do away with all the other things. That is impossible, because the kind of investment you make for those equipment and these devices are the north and south extremes. They will give more accurate and very rugged results, etc. That is still required, but still, one step next to the first aid, what you can do, also taking care of the patient was what we can do. So wearable sensing technology can only complement the existing traditional measurements, which are more accurate, higher resolution, etc., etc., and even the assessments. But one step before going to those places, we can use wearable sensor technology. And the beautiful application of this is that we can go about our normal life, still our vital parameters are being monitored. So that's the huge impact that the wearable sensors have made. And now the principles, sensors are sensors. You can still employ the electrical, thermal, optical, piezoelectrical, mechanical, electromechanical, electrochemical, etc. Very similar to the conventional sensor. But the thing is, they're very flexible. They're very smart. For example, in the chemistry lab, you would have seen an electrochemical sensor with a very big anode, very big cathode. But here, I can screen print the anode and cathode of an electrochemical sensor on the human body like a tattoo. Right? So that's the standing out example to differentiate between the form factor of the device. But for that, the operating principle can still be same as our conventional sensors. However, we want them to give an electrical output, because it's always easy to signal, condition them, or interfacing will be easy, processing, transmission, measurement, etc. The purpose of this particular paragraph is to say that we don't prefer to use mechanical kind of sensors that will give some mechanical output like what a thermometer gives, because it will make your life harder only. So therefore, all wearable sensors will be electrical sensors or electrical transducer that will give an electrical output, either as a charge or a voltage, an EMF or a current or a frequency, etc., that you can easily play with. So that is one distinct property of wearable sensors, that they are very predominantly electrical transducers or electrical sensors. I mean, this picture says it all. So don't think they're very big devices. You can see the wristband that this subject is wearing. So it will have some kind of a, micro printed or a screen printed using suitable fabrication technology, that, it will have an anode, cathode, etc. You can very clearly see 4 different colors. Probably each one of them are sensitive to different constituents on the sweat that is coming out of this particular patient. You can see, one is monitoring pH, one is manufacturing Cl, then sodium, then potassium, then NH4, and so on and so forth. And you'll have very micro channels that are being fabricated here. And see here, they make all these measurements and they will communicate to the mobile device of the particular patient. So therefore, that is where it will support better living of the human patient. And in fact, this picture is even more clear. So you have one electrode here, one could be anode and a cathode. Now this is an electrochemical sensor in which the fluid is the sweat of the particular person, and you can see arrays of these electrodes. They make various measurement. Probably this is the way a wearable sensor will get onto your human body. It has to be flexible, and you can go about your normal duty, but there will be some very, very small piece of electronics that is attached, so that it will do the signal processing, interfacing, and the wireless communication to the required place also. So that's about wearable sensors. I'm sure it should be interesting to all the participants here. If there are any questions, please stop me. I'll be more than happy to take it. Towards the end also, I can try to answer your questions if I know the answer, of course. Yeah. Now, this is very amazing when I list the typical parameters and sorts that are being measured using wearable sensors, nothing less than what you typically measure in pulmonary diagnostics or conva diagnostics. May not be, the list is not as huge as that, but still we should appreciate what all we measure. Using wearable sensors, people I've measured pulse rate, blood oxygen saturation level, respiration monitoring, hand gesture recognition, acceleration and inertial sensors, blood pressure, body temperature, and whatnot. And look at this huge list of salts that people have measured using wearable sensors: calcium, sodium, potassium, all chlorides, lactate, creatinine that will tell the kidney function, the cholesterol, we know what happens, the urea, uric acid, oxalate, triglycerides, ascorbic acid. So, I mean, I have just listed some of the important salts and parameters that are being measured. And if you look at the literature today, I'm sure people have, gone even much ahead. But let me tell you one important thing here. In addition to measuring all this, we always would like to measure the body temperature, either the surface body temperature or the core body temperature, or the CBT, using a suitable technology. This picture just shows hypothalamus, which is a thermal regulator of the human body. So usually whenever, even when you go to a clinic, it is your BP and body temperature that are measured first, because they indicate the several physiological conditions of the particular subject. So same way, alongside the various things that you measure, all these plus all this, we usually, have some sensor that will measure the temperature also, because you can provide a huge amount of information about the health conditions such as stroke, heart attack, shock, lung disease, infection, etc. So that's the reason why we first become feverish when something is not well in the human body. So therefore, temperature is another important parameter that is measured using wearable sensing technology and then remotely communicated. Now, I just listed all these parameters that are measured on the human body, but let me tell you one important thing. The human movement is always affected by many factors like the physiological, anatomical, environmental, social effects, and even abnormal physical and emotional conditions. So I'm trying to tell you that there is always a need to identify the reduced or impaired movement and then estimate the important parameters affecting the movement, right? Look at these two horses. From the way they are moving, you can know the health condition typically. So the point I'm trying to drive in here is that in wearable sensing technology, because the subject is moving in the field, going about his normal life, in addition to measuring the various parameters that I listed, or the salts that I have listed, or the temperature that is being listed, we would also like to have an estimate of what is the human body doing. Is he comfortable? Can he sit? Can he walk? Can he run? Right? Can he climb the stairs? Because that will have some relation to an estimation of his health condition. See, for example, if my doctor says that Banu is having a cardiac risk, it is nice for him to also know, am I able to move, or am I, I've fallen on the floor, right? So that will help him to assess me better and give a medical attention better. So therefore, a wearable device may be less worthy for measuring the vital parameters if we don't have a notion on what is the human body doing, right? So to summarize, I make all those parameters, and also over and above, and very importantly, I'll measure what is the human body doing. Is he sleeping? Is he in a coma? Or is he in a shock? Is there any seizure? Or can he still walk? So therefore, whenever we use wearable sensing technology, as I told you, we'll monitor the temperature, and also we use a very popular MEMS based or CMOS based inertial sensors to know the shocks he's taking, the vibration, the movement, accelerometers. We use a gyroscope to know his rotation, etc., etc. And we have huge number of very small devices like this AD analog devices is very popular to make all these devices. So friends, in addition to all the parameters, we also measure his body movements using suitable accelerometers or gyroscopes in wearable sensing technology, right? Hope the point is well driven. Now, making of wearable sensors, as I told you, the sensor principles will remain unchanged. You can use electrochemical, electro-optical, electrochemical. All those you can still use, but at miniaturization for the reason of the way they are deployed, right? Because of the way they are deployed, that is their body worn, the subject is on their daily routines, and we have to do continuous monitoring of the particular parameter, etc. It is impossible to use the invasive techniques wherein you take a blood sample. So whenever we talk about wearable sensors, please understand we cannot take a blood sample because he's not in a clinical setup to do that, or you don't have a chromatographic instrument to very fantastically analyze his blood sugar levels or creatinine level, etc., etc. So we typically use non-invasive techniques in which we'll not be taking the blood out of the human body. So therefore, the quest in search of alternative samples in place of blood for non-invasive diagnostic has been under intense investigation for decades. So therefore, wearable sensing technologies are based not on the blood serum, on the serum, but they're based on the external body fluids, which can have vital information that are related to the health condition. And wherever required, we can always develop some correlation studies and try to see. See, for example, if you detect the glucose sample in my saliva, it may not be same as the glucose sample is my blood, but you can always have a correlation factor between these two through suitable research and scientific studies and establish what is the correlation that is existing. Or even from the body fluids, you can make very, very vital information that are being drawn. So the typical body fluids that people use to make non-invasive wearable sensors are saliva, tears, sweat, and what is called as a skin interstitial fluid, which is some fluid that is present probably a few microns below the outer surface of the layer before the dermis. Somewhere in the epidermis region, you have this particular fluid that are being present. But now when you make wearable flexible sensors, you should also have wearable flexible electronics to some extent for sweat analysis, for saliva analysis, for this ISF analysis. Blood analysis, usually we don't do it for vital, this particular thing, or for wound monitoring, or for tear analysis, or for breath analysis. We can develop huge number of devices that will have these applications. In fact, I will highlight some of the recent applications that people have developed. And before I talk about these body fluids very quickly, let me give some examples of the wearable sensors that are based on body fluids before we actually understand a little more technical details of these different body fluids. Look at this. So these eyeglasses can measure your lactate and glucose contents. You can have a mouth guard placed in your mouth permanently that can do continuous monitoring of your uric acid. Or you can have graphene-based tooth sensor to detect the bacteria in the mouth. Or you can have a microfluidic sensor to measure lactate and glucose. Or you can have a nanomaterial kind of a patch like a tattoo that is on your place that can do continuous glucose monitoring. Or you can use an iontophoretic patch sensor to measure glucose, or you can have a self-powered textile-based biosensor to measure the lactate, or you can have wearable, diagnostic also. It's a lab on a body is nothing. We are not away from lab on a body. In the coming years, you can have an integrated sensor array to measure this, or you can have a chemical and physical hybrid kind of a sensor patch. The patch is present somewhere here. You can measure lactate and ECG. And you can have smart contact lenses that will, on your tear liquid, they measure glucose. And also there is a small wireless module, very tiny, that can communicate the data wireless to your smartphone. That's the extent to which wearable sensor technology have been developed. And they're absolutely based on the body fluids that I had listed earlier, right? I'm sure this slide would have, increased your interest to know more about these particular details. Saliva, we produce a lot of saliva. In fact, what is permeated from the blood will become saliva. So saliva is a very complex fluid with numerous chemical species permeating from the blood, and it carries many vital physiological parameters, and it is easily available and does not require pre-treatment steps for testing and direct use of sample. There is no chance of contamination because we constantly produce saliva, and the saliva can have huge number of information. And the biochemical species present in saliva provide very, good online condition monitoring related to your emotional, hormonal, nutritional, or metabolic condition, the pH level, the fluoride acidity, etc. Right? See, when you're under tension, your mouth will dry. So that means your body is unable to produce that saliva. So for somebody to whom you want to measure, let me say, the stress condition of a, little baby with autism problem, in fact, you can have vital information about counseling him or training him, etc. And that's the high end of application I'm trying to give you. But the saliva can provide all these vital information for that matter. And look at this device. So somebody has developed, this sensitive and non-invasive cholesterol determination in saliva. So you can take a drop of saliva and that goes to your sensor, which is typically based on, this polymer-based kind of a sensor. I'm not going to the details of this. We can always do that later if you wish to. So, but this particular sensor is able to measure what is the cholesterol that is present in the saliva, which can always have some correlation to the cholesterol in the actual blood, because as I told you just now, saliva is what is getting permeated from the blood sample. So obviously, see, the human body is a very, very highly connected system, right? Highly connected system. So obviously there will be one or the other correlation between all these samples, which we have to establish through serious research and medical studies. And this is a mouth guard, which is a wearable device. So it can, measure the salivary uric acid biosensing platform. So that is where your wireless electronics is there. So that should be, waterproof, because it should not, the saliva should not do that. So there is a uric acid biosensor that is being present here. You can see the two distinct readings that it gives in arbitrary units, about micromoles, whatever. So this is around 250 for a healthy person, or more than 750 for somebody with hyper, uricemia. So that is detected. So these are the two devices. Then later, the MIT researchers have developed a lab on the body kind of a device that can be worn on the face using a saliva acquisition module. So it will have both calorimetric biosensors and even digital sensors. And so this is a device that a patient can wear. So it becomes a wearable lab on the body. In fact, you can see it has got a battery, it has got a sensor cartridge, like the way your printer has cartridge. There will be a biosensor strip roll. So there is a saliva acquisition module, then the color sensor here. There is a small motor here, so that you will keep changing the biosensor strip from one strip to another strip after the thing. So then you have a processing unit here with communication and control board. So this is what is there inside the wearable lab on the body, and then the data is communicated to a mobile phone like this. So this is the way the device works. It siphons in the spit or the saliva and transfer it over to the rolled multiplexed chemical biosensors. You have the chemical biosensors here, and once the sample reacts with those color changes, so the RGB color sensor are there, so they'll read the output data and convert that into a biomarker value to help determine any abnormalities in the patient. And the sensor, use sensor is switched off, and then a new one is brought in by the cartridge and motor assembly that you have here. So that's the extent to which the technology has grown, and your ability, and I mean, we're able to integrate more and more things in a small device, and therefore we have a this module to detect the cholesterol, etc., using a saliva, right? Yeah. And that was with the first fluid. This is a second fluid called the tear. Please don't think, we have to make the people cry to generate the tears to make the samples. There is always a thin layer of tear that is present on the, thing. And look at this. Tear contains so many chemical components, my dear friends. It has got Na+, it has got K+, chlorine, magnesium, calcium, bicarbonate, urea, ascorbate, lactate, glucose, and total protein to this extent. So this is one unit of tear containing all this. So that's the reason why when the tear flows into your mouth, you feel saltish, because of the huge number of chemical ions that are present in that particular tear sample. So all this will tell stories and stories about the health condition of the human body. So therefore, people have developed a sensor based on the measurements made on the tear. And you can place a very miniaturized and a flexible thin wearable sensor on the retina, and important parameters can be measured and monitored directly without any need of sample transportation. So the beauty of the device here. It's not that you have to go to a center and give a blood sample or some other sample. You have a wearable contact lens with integrated electronics, and you can make continuous measurement of all these parameters. That will give lot of information about that. You'll be amazed. From tear, people have been able to detect conditions or diseases like allergic conjunctivitis, cancer, cystic fibrosis, then diabetic retinopathy, dry eye, glaucoma, ocular allergy, then Sjogren's syndrome, which is the disorder of the immune system. Then thyroid ophthalmology, then herpes simplex virus also have been detected. So, I mean, tear is a second sample for our wearable sensors, and lots of devices have been developed using tears also. Then to give an example of the tear-based glucose biosensors, this company called Noviosense had a tear glucose sensor. You can have a device that is, being fixed here, and it will continuously access the tear glucose and measure the glucose. And this is a second device made by Google and Novartis again. You will again measure the tear glucose concentration. You have a soft contact lens here with a tear glucose sensor and a chip and antenna that are integrated here. So they will, continuously monitor the glucose and then, communicate to their device, right? So people have developed tear-based wearable sensor for that matter. Then sweat, of course, this fluid contains water and various electrolytes, nitrogenous components and metabolites. And it's an unprecedented solution for healthcare monitoring, because there are some challenges like this. The sweat can easily get contaminated and it will get evaporated. So therefore, there is a lack of real-time sweat sampling like sensors. Unlike the tear, the tear is always present on the your retina, and the mouth will always produce saliva. But tear is not. This sweat is not so. because you require some adequate amount of sample to do this. So there are lots of challenges in making sweat-based sensor, but notwithstanding all these challenges, people have developed a lot of in situ monitoring towards health monitoring. So they have been able to measure the pH, the zinc, sodium lactate, ammonium, calcium, then cystic fibrosis parameters, then the physical stress levels. That's very important. So then the glucose, then osteoporosis, bone mineral loss. Yeah, your SCET can tell you the stories behind the way your bone is getting weakened for a certain kind of people. Then skin fibrosis, then the alcohol level. In fact, at some hostels in the or universities abroad, it may be embarrassing for everybody to see if somebody is infected with alcohol or not. So we can be given a device that will tell whether somebody has taken alcohol, so that is permeated into the sweat and so on and so forth. Then the signs of drug abuse can also be detected. And then kidney failures can be detected using in situ monitoring of sweat. So that's the extent to which wearable sensing technologies have been developed for that matter. So just some examples for this. So this is an epidermal temporary transfer tattoo here. It's a tattoo, but that can measure lactate and pH. So then you have a bandage here that can measure the Na+ concentration in the sweat, and it also has an RFID and a RFID communication to a smartphone. Or you can have a smart wristband here with a flexible sensor and a flexible printed circuit board to measure, say, the glucose, and then a flexible sensor array to have a multiplexed heavy metal monitoring in sweat. When you say multiplexed, so as I told you in one of the examples, you can measure different metal components that are present in this, like calcium, sodium, potassium, bicarbonate, etc., etc. So all the metals can also be detected using sweat. And then you have a graphene-based flexible and stretchable diabetes patch who can do continuous, glucose monitoring, etc. And then a disposable strip for glucose, sensing. So all these have been successfully measured using the, sweat also. And finally, the SIF. But this is one exemptional device. I'll tell you what, because the fluid is present not on the surface, because it is below the in the epidermis layer, right? Yeah. But it can tell you, stories like it will contain sugars, salts, fatty acids, amino acids, coenzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, white blood cells, and waste products from the cells. So this fluid can be used for the detection of sugar levels, any organ failure, drug efficacy, salts, etc. But one thing is, I told you, that we would like to not use the invasive techniques for wearable sensor. They have to be predominantly non-invasive in nature. But this is one exemption in which it is very, very minimally invasive. It will not be painful for the patient because you can have these nano rods that are being printed. So probably the height of these devices will be less than a micron. And when you wrap it around your skin, you will hardly feel any pain because they have to, reach certain depth from the skin surface, maybe to a few microns or whatever, to take out the particular sample and make measurement. But compared to the first three, fluids that I discussed, the saliva, the tear, and the sweat, this is minimally invasive, but will not be very painful to the people. But a lot of things have been developed using this also, right? Yeah. So friends, we defined what is wearable sensing technology all about, and I listed the various salts and parameters that are being measured using wearable sensor. Then I moved you to a topic to say that we cannot use a blood sample and we would like to use the body fluids to make wearable sensors. And I briefed about what are the contents present in these body fluids and how they can go about measurement. Now, how do we make a wearable system for that matter? Typically like any other instrumentation or measurement system, you will have sensors or smart sensors, but now they have to be thin film or thick, very flexible kind of a sensor, very, very miniaturized to, not to discomfort the user. Then, of course, we require signal conditioning modules to interface with the suitable electronics. Then we require data transmission modules and also data processing and display modules. This is typically like any other instrumentation system, but the device will get miniaturized. As you saw in that saliva acquisition module, it is something that you can wear on the face, right? So that's the extent to which you can make that. So this is a very generic block diagram taken from this particular book by Subhash Chandra Mukhopadhyay, my good friend in Australia. And so they were able to measure variable sensors for physical parameters like temperature, any of these parameter, or any of these chemical or biological parameters. We use some sensor here. We require some interfacing circuit that goes to a microcontroller unit or any other smart processing unit, miniaturized of course. So then they will do serial communication to a wireless communication module. We of course will not use parallel communication for the reason serial is more advantageous. So then he will communicate to a remote place. It could be a personal digital assistant worn on the belt of the human body, or it could be a router that is present in the vicinity, or it could be a different thing. So based on the kind of wireless communication protocol that you employ, the distance between the wearable sensor and this device can always vary. So then it will serially go to the monitor, the computer, where you can analyze, you can store the data, build a database, and so on and so forth. But let me tell you, this interfacing circuit is not the very big electronics what you build in your electronics lab. We have very smart solutions available, what are called analog front ends. I'll show an example in the next slide. It's a very, very small device capable of doing huge number of things for you, and we employ very smart electronics in the form of what are called analog front ends to make the job easy. And usually when you take up the design and development of a wearable sensor, in addition to meeting all the technical requirements, we should also ensure that we meet some non-functional requirements, like the device should be aesthetically pleasing, it should be portable, it should be durable, it should consume low power, it should be user friendly, and the interface should be very easy, etc., etc. So these are all the typical things we also would like to look for, right? Yeah. Having told you what is the typical block diagram of the typical wearable sensing technology, let me tell you one example of an analog front end, just to be in the line of totality, that the analog devices has manufactured. So it's a single lead ECG front end with embedded right leg driven circuit. We know what is right leg drive circuit all about. That is to improve the CMRR of your ECG acquisition system. And it is specifically designed to extract, amplify, and filter small biopotentials, especially ECG signal, in the presence of very noisy environments. Noise you can't do away in the human body because of the highly interconnection that we have within the human body. And they focus applications for wearable devices, portable home care systems, and exercise equipment. And this is what the typical device has. I'm not going to the details of this, but as you can see here, you can have two sense electrodes, and you have the right leg driven circuit that is coming out of the instrumentation amplifier with a buffer, and then it has got all the electronic signals so that they can be easily interfaced to a device. So this is size of a device which could probably be 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter, or even less than that, because our device is wearable and it has to be as smart as possible, right? So thanks to the so-called analog front ends, the interfacing circuit is not very complex in wearable sensing technology. Very smart solutions are indeed available for that matter. So let me take an example of a wearable instrumented vest or a jacket for posture monitoring. As you can see here, there are 5 accelerometers fixed at various positions on the jacket. They're embedded into the textile of this. So when somebody wears a jacket, so they will get in touch with the human body within a conductive textile. So the parameters are measured, then communicated to the common bus. So then there is a gateway so that it is communicated to that. The application of this is, as I told you, for rehabilitation purpose. So an expert here is able to have a real-time data streamed out from the vest. So his data is getting communicated to this. As you can see here, this 4 to 5 lines here, what you can see here are the acceleration measured by these 5 accelerometers. So they will do real-time monitoring. And if he's an expert, he can remotely monitor the posture of a particular patient who is getting rehabilitated. He can monitor the posture, give him feedback, and then detect the inadequate postures because he's getting rehabilitated. You think of somebody who had met an accident and there is a spine injury, he has been advised, some rest. So when he recovers to his normal life, so remote monitoring of his posture, what we do in that typical physiotherapy kind of a setup are easily done by the expert or the doctor from a remote place. So that's the application of this. And this is little technical about that. So we fix the accelerometers. One at the lower cervical spine, then one on the chest, then 2, 4, and 5 on both sides of the waist. So then at the back lumbar section 3 also we place another accelerometer. This is scientifically developed. So they're always put on a common bus so that they can communicate the device. So then you have a very low power microcontroller like a Cortex M3 or Cortex M4 with all the peripherals that are being available. So I'm sure the purpose of this is to make you get a feel that wearable sensing technology has gone to that extent in which the devices can get embedded into the textile or a wearable device, and they do all the communication among themselves, and finally, remotely transmit the data to a remote place for his health monitoring. Yeah, so that is the second application. I mean, the first application what I've listed. Now, let me give a very, very fitting example, and it was developed very recently in July 2020 by researchers at the Northwestern University and the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, wherein they have developed a wearable sensor and they have created algorithms to detect the early signs and symptoms of the COVID-19, the coronavirus, what scared the whole world. And also, you can monitor the patients as the illness progresses. So this is a wearable device which is kept below the throat level, which is called a suprastral region. So that's where it is being fixed, and at the visible dip at the base of the throat, which is called as a suprasternal notch, and it can measure the coughing intensity and the pattern, and then the chest wall movement, the respiratory sound, heart rate, temperature, etc. So all these sensors are embedded here, and you can make the measurement, and we do some biomedical signal processing or analysis and communicate the data to a smart mobile phone in which you can measure all these parameters remotely. I don't mean that directly present the data to the user and which he cannot understand. So therefore there will be APIs written on the mobile phone using which the data will be presented in a form so that the user can understand that, parallel to communicating data to a medical expert, right? So these are the two examples I'd like to give to highlight the applications of wearable sensors to increase our comfort and living, or assistive devices to increase the healthcare purposes of that, right? And from our end, we have covered, we have tried to develop two devices. I call them whereas humble devices because they are no way comparable to what you saw now. But however, just to appreciate the work of my earlier students, we had developed a PPG sensor using a device that is placed at the pinna. So it's a wearable device, and we measure the PPG at the pinna, and we were able to get very good PPG signals like this. And we cross-checked or calibrated our device against very standard devices like the Choice MMed device or the Index Fit Register Pulse device. And you can see here for 93 in our work, we got 94, 93, etc., etc. For 86, we got 87, 86, and so on. So our device was relatively, quite accurate compared to what is commercially available. And also, we recently developed a wearable and non-invasive cerebral oximeter. We use SpO2 measurement in the PPG sensor, what is put on our finger. But also, there is a requirement to measure the ratio of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in the cerebral region for certain class of patients. I'm not talking about this particular curve, which is called as the modified Beer-Lambert's law, because your oxygen-rich and deoxygenated blood will have different reflection spectra, and we make some relative measurement to find out what is the extent to which this region is highly oxygenated or not. This is very important for patient, with partial stroke. For example, if their left portion of the brain is, paralyzed, you would like to monitor, compare, etc., under both stimulated and non-stimulated condition. But we just did some simple with non-simulation by making a very, very, very simple. That's why, if you look at this device and whatever the device that I demonstrated earlier, so therefore I'm humbled to say that we developed only humble devices, but we were able to measure very consistent SpO2 levels in the cortex region. As you can see, repeatability was very good for the device that we developed. So let me, recollect the names of the three students who worked on these projects. These are my three students, Atit, Neha, and Vismaya, who did this project. So I'm happy to acknowledge the contribution that they made to the development of these two wearable devices. Yeah. So, Sir Ravish, I'm halfway through. I have to start with the second part. Can I go ahead? Your time permits? Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure, sir. Carry on.
Yeah. Thank you. So, friends, I discussed about the wearable sensors and the techniques, etc., in the first part. So now in the second part of my presentation, let me take you from this wearable sensor to how do we connect them so that they become the connected wearable sensors, leading to what are called as the wireless body area networks, or W-bands, or the medical IoT system, which is one step further to the wearable sensor to have us well connected to the doctors or experts through the internet, which is very prevailing in today's world. So this is what typically happens. Whatever the wearable sensors I spoke about are worn by the human body. And, yeah, may I request the participants to mute the audio. There is some background noise.
Santosh.
Excuse me. May I request all of you to mute the mics? Yeah. So we have the intra WBAN or beyond WBAN to a gateway mode or base station. Then through the internet it goes to the medical server or a medical expert. So this is the typical way I can illustrate. Yeah, excuse me. I request you to mute your mics. I think they have muted their speaker, so they are unable to hear our instruction. Yeah. Yeah, and going further, so you have all the things.
Hello, please mute yourself.
I was answerless. On share broker.
Sir Ravish, you can call to if you know who is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so let me go ahead. Notwithstanding. I mean, so you have the medical IoT systems here, and the typical challenges that you make, that you come across when you make this are. You have to look at the reliability, they have to be affordable, and you have to give good quality of service, and the scalability is very, very important. Scalability is a big thing here because you will never have an idea of the devices that are connected into the internet because it is an open-ended thing, right? So scalability is a very big issue. Your solution should coexist with the existing network. I should not come out with a technology and say I want a different kind of a network than what is existing. No, then you have to have good security and privacy. Then the efficiency should be good, and the energy consumption should be very, very less because it's a portable application, and it has to somehow fit into the existing internet that is there, so that it becomes an internet of things. So then over and above, it should become a medical internet of things. So lots of challenges are there, but there are very good success stories to have these particular things. So the very two interesting applications of medical IoT systems or the WBAN networks are these follows. The elderly care, we were taken care when we were kids, so therefore we have to take care of the childs in the old bodies. So one very interesting application of wearable sensing technology extended to make medical IoT system is for elderly care, and the second application is to take care of the fighters in the war field, because they're at very remote places. They're in very, very horrible situations of weather, rain, mountains, etc. So to make them better, we have to make physiological consequences, like you have to detect hyperthermia, hypoxia, then metabolic fatigue, vigilance lapses, then the dehydration problems, then the physiological stress. They're at the border, right? So a lot of stress they will have. Then inadequate restorative sleep. So jolt, blast, repeated impact exposure, toxic substance exposure. So we should be able to predict significant performance degradation, and then which can also lead to impending casualty. So people have developed, various sensors like the headband EEG or the oximetry, acoustic season, and even the dead reckoning modules that will use 3-axis accelerometers, GPS, magnetometer, and altimeter, EKG, EMG sensor, body care and skin temperature, etc., etc. So these three pictures will surely highlight the very importance of developing applications in which somebody should be monitored from remote places to give them better health conditions, of course, without discomforting them. Yeah. And they should be very reliable, right? They should be very rugged, and they should really have some real-time response, because in real-time system, a late answer but a right answer is always a wrong answer. I repeat, in real-time systems or situations, right answer but a late answer will always become a wrong answer, right? See, for example, if I have some cardiac problems, if that is detected 2 hours later, probably I may not be saved, right? So giving solution at the right time is very important for all these applications. So we have, the devices that are connected together. We have devices in the manufacturing sector, in the distribution sector, then in the point, patient home, then at the healthcare provider, then at the customer service. If all of them can be connected together, we have medical IoT system. And to define what it is, so we will have a web-based network of smart medical devices which are effectively communicating with each one another and without direct human interaction, so they're able to manage themselves. See, I'll tell you, if you can keep the human out of the loop, half of the problems will be solved, because in most of the situations, it is the human errors that will lead to all the problems, because instruments work the way they want to read, because they're all programmed. There is a fixed hardware and a piece of code that is always running, but it is a human error that can lead to huge problems. So when you talk about medical IoT or wearable sensing technology, it is that we keep the human away in the loop will solve half of the problems. So then half the solutions are given by this to make the situation smarter and smarter. And before I talk about medical IoT, let me define what is IoT, and we will remember the father of IoT today. To define what it is, the IoT integrates the interconnectedness of human culture, which are things. We are highly connected to the things. We need to use things. We love things, etc. With the interconnectedness of our digital information system, which is the internet, right? So what is the interconnectedness of human beings are the things, and what is interconnected in the digital system is the internet. When you put them together, so that becomes the Internet of Things, which is the word. The definition coined by Kevin Ashton. And he coined this phrase of Internet of Things in the year 1999. Of course, it took more than 2 decades to really come up here life. This is Kevin Ashton. And when you talk about role of IoT in the healthcare industry, it is for the collection, recording, and analysis of huge volumes of patient data for preventive care, diagnosis, assessing the treatment efficacy, and it provides other valuable and actionable insights to patients and doctors. See, this is very, very important. Insights are important, impacts are important, but they should be actionable. I mean to say that you should get a number, you should get a value from which you can take an action. So to that extent, the devices should be reliable or dependable, right? And they should be very, very consistent. But thanks to medical IoT systems, this has become possible, if not in the developing countries, at least in the developed countries. Yeah. So some of the key impact areas of medical IoT systems are you can provide continuous clinical care, especially when the patients are in very critical conditions and they're hospitalized. Their signals could be continuously monitored, and you can do it from a remote place. And the information regarding all the vital functions is transmitted and shared in real time with the caregiver for remote surveillance of patients. If somebody infected with COVID and nobody can go nearer to him. If you have a wearable device and the COVID infected patient is connected to the medical IoT system from a remote place, you can monitor his health conditions and instruct him to follow the instructions, etc., so that you can save lives. So that is one very direct application in the recent times. Then medical adherence, elderly people with Alzheimer problems or low memory problems or etc. They will not, adhere to the, medicines that you have to take. So you can have a medical IoT system to track if they're adhering to the treatment plan or not, or they can remind them, or you can remind the caretakers so that, they will stick to the plan. And you can do early prevention, because IoT-based monitoring of daily activities and well-being, they will provide early detection of interruptions in everyday routine or abnormal events, and you can provide alerts to the family. For example, if somebody is bedridden at your home, you can not be able to sit next to them throughout the day. But you can have medical connected IoT connected devices on the subject's body, and you can come to your office and instructions are given to you whenever there is some emergency at the home. In fact, that was the first application that I told you when I spoke about wearable sensing. So that extended become a medical IoT, and they're able to give all the solutions. And also for wellness programs, where you can use smartphones like Fitbit devices or wearable devices, can be very effective in tracking activity levels or other parameters to know your fitness and overall health is. So these are the different key impact areas of medical IoT systems. And if you look at the key applications in IoT healthcare, the typical applications for glucose level sensing, then ECG monitoring, blood pressure monitoring, body temperature monitoring, oxygen saturation monitoring, and monitoring the congestive heart failure, which is the need of the hour with the cardiac problems on the rise. So medical IoT can solve the problem, right? Yeah. And the key advantages that IoT in healthcare has brought are the improvement in the outcomes. Because of the access to the real-time information, you can do informed decisions and provide, evidence-based treatment. Not listening to the stories. For example, we often say, the patient history is very important because it will tell stories about what happened then and now. But if you have real-time information, the doctor is highly informed about or well informed about the problems with a particular patient, and there will be evidences for that. See, a patient, if you say, I was not feeling sleepy, there is no evidence for that. But if you have a wearable device that can prove that he has got sleep disorders, so then what solutions could be given, right? And so on and so forth. This is an example I gave. So it will have a good improvement in the patient outcomes, reduction of errors. Thanks to the absence of a human in the loop, you can have automated workflows. In fact, we talk about digital healthcare. So that's the reason why you can have reduction in the errors and better disease management, because you can do continuous patient monitoring and access to real-time data that will enable prevention or early treatment of the disease and lowering of the cost. Because you don't have to, pay huge fee, and there is no waiting time, and you can reduce the number of visits that you have to make to the doctor or the hospital admissions. So there is a overall lowering of the cost if you use medical IoT system, and then enhance patient experience. The improved outcomes and reduction in errors and timely intervention by the experts will result in better patient experience, of course. And then data analysis. It is a huge impact. Once the data becomes digital and it is stored with a record kept in the patient's name, you can manage, you can easily get back the histories, and you can be analyzing that in the cloud where there is no limit of the memory depth. So huge, in fact, we study data science or data analytics, which is what is very trending. The reason for all that coming is the availability of data, right? In the good old days, where was the data available? Where was it stored? But for a hard copy of a record in which you had entered what was your SBA1C today. But today everything is digitized. Data is becoming available, so you can do huge analysis algorithms to come out with much more meaningful decisions or diagnostic procedures, so that you can treat the people in a much better way, right? Yeah. To very quickly summarize, because there were 3 slides on the impacts, applications, and advantages, let me spend 2 minutes to summarize all of them to highlight the impact areas. So the impact areas are continuous clinical care, remote patient monitoring, then medication adherence by the elderly or the kids, then early prevention of problems. So then for the wellness programs, then the applications are for glucose level sensing, for better management, then ECG monitoring, BP, temperature, oxygen saturation level, then congestive heart failure problems. So then the advantages are improvement in outcomes, reduction of errors, better disease management, and affordable cost, and enhanced patient experience. Then you can do lots of data analysis because of the humongous amount of data that is available to you. Now, having defined the impacts and applications and advantages of medical IoT system, very quickly let me give an example of an end-to-end medical IoT system, which typically looks like this. So here is the patient in which we make an open mode, open mode with variable sensors which are all connected. So they will, collect all the data on the human body. They can talk to themselves also to a router or a PDA that is present close by. So then, we usually use ad hoc communication in medical IoT systems. So it will, the data will go from router to router, then it will go to a base station. So then you can have a, gateway. Intel Edison is one popular gateway. So then it can go to the cloud, wherein we use what is called as a Mosquito, which is an open source message broker or server, in which the clients will be subscribing to this particular fellow. And remember, internet is a public domain, right? You can have lots and lot of subscribers to this particular clients who have subscribed to this particular server, and you can go about managing multiple of things. So this is the way the data can flow, starting from a sensor through the router, through the gateway, back to the subscribed PC, who will be an expert, right? Banu can be living here in Bangalore, but my expert could be, say, in the US and is well informed about that, or my expert could be in the Narayana Hridayalaya or some other place, so he's well informed about my data. His job becomes easy. My pleasure, my pains of going there and waiting in queues and etc. becomes easy. So that is the advantage this can bring in. In fact, this open mode is a sensor node which is typically based on a very powerful wireless microcontroller chip. One example I'm giving here, because remember I'm giving an example of an end-to-end IoT system. So it could be CC2538 based system on chip kind of a device with low power wireless personal area network and Zigbee applications. And the chip provides superior features such as longer radio range. You can wirelessly communicate to quite some distances, and you can have very partial configurations like very low power modes you can use. Remember, most of the devices are battery operated, and it will have a bootloader mechanism, and it runs on what is called a Contiki OS, which is a real-time operating system. So I have slowly taken you from wearable sensors to a medical IoT system, then to an open mode, which has to be an embedded device with all these facilities that is run on a real-time operating system, right? So now my sensor is a smart sensor, right? So I've taken you to a smart sensor or an intelligent sensor, where we also kind of word called as edge intelligence, which is capable of making this measurement, taking decisions, etc. And this is a very lightweight and flexible operating system for very resource constrained devices in the IoT system. So this is an operating system for this application. Probably you can use some other operating system. Remember, I'm giving an example. So it contains an RFC compliant low power IPv6 communication stack, and it can enable internet connectivity. And it can, this operating system can run himself on variety of, hardware platforms like the ARM Cortex M3, M4, or the MSP 430 of Texas Instruments. And it has got a very low code footprint of just 100 KB. So that's the footprint of the operating system that can run on this particular hardware like CC2528 3OC or any of these controllers. And you can make a smart sensor that is available as an open mode here. And then it can go to the internet gateway, which runs an embedded Linux OS, and you can do some Python programming here to bridge the gap between the cloud side and the wireless sensor network side of the IoT. So friends, on one side, you have the substrate PC or the client, then the cloud here, and then you have the wireless sensor network, which runs on an embedded system like this, which uses a real-time operating system like Contiki OS, and they are well bridged by the gateway, which runs on an embedded Linux OS. This is just an example. I mean, why I chose this example because maybe I was referring to a particular resource of this particular author, or you can take other examples also. But this is the best way of typically demonstrating what will we have in a end-to-end medical IoT system. The data flow can be from sensor back to him, or when he would like to give an instruction, it can go back to the patient and you can close the loop. Here comes a security issue. For example, my parameter is measured and communicated, and he's giving me some instruction. Somebody should not hack my network and give a wrong instruction to me, or my network should not be hacked and send a wrong report to the doctor. Right? Hackers are always there. So that should be prevented. So therefore, security becomes a very key issue when you talk about medical IoT systems further. Yeah. Now, there is a lot of wireless communication here, maybe among the devices, or then to the router, and then to the gateway, and then how does the gateway communicate to the broker or the cloud part. So we will end up using different wireless communication protocols, even in a given medical IoT system for that matter. So the typical IoT things that are, protocols used in IoT systems are, it could be Zigbee, or it could be Bluetooth Low Energy, or it could be Q-Wave, or it could be Sigfox, or it could be LoRa. So these are all the typical, communication protocols what we use. So it is, it's not wise to invest a lot of time to discuss about all this. I'm just giving a glimpse of the communication protocols that are being used. So we use Zigbee, Bluetooth Low Energy, LoRa, Sigfox, or Z-Wave. And you can see here the range could be just 100 meter, more than 60 meter. This is 15 to 20 kilometer. This is 30 to 50 kilometer, where we use for countryside thing. I mean, from distances if you want to send. And Z-Wave is only for a distance of within a hospital for 30 meter. So there is a comparison of the power they consume, the data rate, the modulation, the radio that they can use to wirelessly communicate, right? Yeah. So I'm sure you got a feel of the wireless communication protocols that people use in making medical IoT systems. Anyway, I'll share the PDFs if you want, so that you can study that in detail, or you can relive the class by watching the video. As decided by the organizer of this particular FDP. Now, security in IoT. This is very important. With the proliferation of smart mobile devices, intelligent sensors, and lots of wearable devices, and the ubiquitous internet and the cloud computing, the use of IoT is growing almost exponentially. If you look at what is happening, with the progression of years, this is probably somewhere in the 1999 when, he invented or he brought in or he coined the word of Internet of Things. I'm sure it is going to, grow much faster because we talk about social distance, we talk about staying away from all these places, but still we want good health to be made. So therefore, there is no escape from this advanced technology. Technology has gone into our lives. In fact, it will go further into our life. I mean, you can't help it out. Yeah. So the growth poses numerous challenges for the designers and users. Well, it looks very attractive. It looks very catchy. Through all this presentation, I have talked only about the beautiful things that these things can bring. But to make anything beautiful, you have to go through a lot of hardships. All right, you will have numerous challenges like this. And one very significant challenge is the provision of security and access control within the IoT and identity management. Remember, to the internet, you will have lots of things attached. Like the way we have all our systems attached to the internet, our mobile phones connected to the internet. Now, going one step further, our devices are connected to the internet, and we want the devices to communicate among themselves because that becomes the Internet of Things. So, therefore, providing security and access control within the IoT. Then, how do you manage the identities? How do you know that Banu's ECG device is sending this data? There could be Ravish EEG data coming. There could be Banu's EEG data coming. There could be somebody's EEG data coming. So how will you, identify the end user and lots of things, because in the public domain, and remember, it is not point to point. It is millions of people connected to devices and millions of people wearing billions of devices. I have not given a number of that. In fact, that will run into billions and millions in the years to come, with all of them connected to IoT. Of course, there are a huge number of challenges like what I would like to list. And this is the biggest challenge. The challenge when you talk about medical IoT is this: the high mobility of things, then scale of the system in terms of the number of things and users, then the dynamic network topology and the wireless communication mediums. So I'll tell you, friends, medical IoT or IoT is highly, highly heterogeneous, and you will never know what kind of hardware and software technologies that they're using. See, you just think of millions of devices connected to the internet and millions of things connected to that. You have no idea of the kind of things they use, and they're mobile. I'm here today, tomorrow I may be in Chennai, and next time I may be going to Hyderabad, but still I need to be monitored, right? And there could be a lot of people dropping out of the network. They should be detected. There could be dead nodes, right? There could be deaf nodes. There could be nodes that are trying to play mischief by acting as some other node. So lots of things come into picture. So therefore, the network topology could also be very dynamic, and you never know what kind of wireless communication protocols you have to put them together. So honestly, IoT is highly, highly heterogeneous. In fact, I have a slide on that to prove how heterogeneous are our IoT systems. Probably in the next slide or so. And the challenges of whatever I listed, all these challenges are there to make the medical IoT system that is further worsened by factors like the device limitations. You have memory limitation, you have battery life limitation, you have processing limits. See, it's only when you make a device in your laboratory or a clinical setup, but there is no depth of all this. You can have GBs and GBs of memory, right? But when you make a device very small, very portable, so you have memory limitations and you have to save a lot of power, and it has a limited processing capability. Right? You cannot have a quad processor capability to a wearable device that I'm wearing to monitor my EEG, right? Right? There are limitations, meaning that you cannot imply high-end security mechanism, right? Like what you do for our regular internet or email password protection. It is impossible to done for a medical IoT system, but we want to. But there are challenges like this. So that's the point I'm trying to drive here. And arguing against the use of heavyweight security architectures, right? So you have limitations with all the three, and you would like to give security, but you cannot give very high weight security like this. For example, let me say this is my wallet. Let me say I have got say 10,000 rupees. You want to give security to that. Let me say this is somebody's gold in the locker of a bank. So this is heavyweight security. You cannot give heavyweight security to the wallet here, but we want that kind of heavyweight security, right? So that's an analogy I would like to develop. So we want to have a security like this for this, but a lot of challenges to be, faced, right? So you have to compromise somewhere on to the extent to which you can give security, but still your data must be secured and privacy must be protected in medical data, right? For example, if somebody has a, very let me say some bad disease, you can't make it public that so and so had that particular disease, but still it should be addressed, it should be still detected, it should be still monitored, right? So privacy of data becomes very, very important. And this is the worst thing. There will be numerous transient relationship. It's not a established relationship. For example, when you go to a college, you will go to a particular place. There is 15 of you, 15 computers, always connected physically to the internet. So there is no transient relationship. But when somebody is, using medical IoT, is attached to the medical IoT, he can be moved out of the hospital, he's discharged, you lose connection, you will go home, you have to establish connection. There will be numerous amount of transient relationship. It's like, when you go on a tour for 10 days, you'll have relationship, but all of them are transient. Today you're here, tomorrow you're somewhere, but you have to have mobility elsewhere. So therefore, we typically use ad hoc networks, and you have to provide very high-end security, compromising on the extent to which you can make it heavyweight, but still you want good security. And then issues of identity to both the users and things, because you're attached, detached, and you're moving the attack network, and access to service. To what extent you should give an access? Let me say, a medical expert has 10 services. Now, he should decide to what extent you should be allowed to give a service. Or let me say, my doctor is absent tomorrow, is on leave, and his assistant is looking at my data. You will never know to what extent he should be allowed to access my data, because he's the in-charge doctor, not the actual doctor. Right. So like this, I can go on giving various illustration examples to tell you it's very, very challenging to have, address all this transient relationship, then the identity management, then the access management. And I'll tell you, in future, there will be around 6.58 connected devices per person in future. I mean, if things go the way that you want them to go, imagine the number of people in the world, and each one wearing 6.58 devices. They're all connected to the internet. Huge number of things have to be managed. It's not going to be easy. And in addition to that, the devices are generating high amount of data, including the user personality identification information called as PII, and the confidential healthcare information, as well as contextual information about location, date, and time. See how things are getting more and more complicated. See, it's not enough if you know that Banu has a mild heart attack and he is in the golden hour, he should be addressed. More important than that is, where is Banu sitting now? What is his location? What's the date? What's the time? Right? If some doctor tells that Banu has some problem 3 days after me, or if it gives a wrong location that he's at home when I'm in the office, or vice versa, the whole purpose is defeated. So therefore, the amount of data or the time stamping, etc., will make it more and more and more sophisticated and complicated. So the bandwidth requirements will be enormous, and handling high bandwidths on low power devices is the very biggest challenge. So that's the point I'm trying to drive here. Yes. And even bigger use is that IoT is truly heterogeneous. You can do something when things are homogeneous, but when it is heterogeneous, it's very, very challenging. For example, you can use different wireless technologies like RFID, Zigbee, LoRa, Sigfox, or Wi-Fi, or you can use ad hoc peer-to-peer network, or 3G, 4G, Zigbee, wireless LANs, wireless body area networks. And you can use different kind of protocols, like for some case you can use power line communication, or the IPv6 low power, 6 low pan, Zigbee smart energy, M2M architecture, or MQTT protocol is very popular in medical IoT systems. And all these technologies help the things in automatic identification of other things they are communicating to you. See, when I say hello to her, Dr. Ravish, I know to whom I am speaking. And Ravi should know that it is Banu who is telling hi to him, right? Imagine, person to person, it's okay. Imagine me addressing a group of 1,000 people. I should identify to whom I am addressing. So, I mean, in that context, it becomes more and complicated. But thanks to IPv6, it is convenient to assign unique digital identities and access to various things, because the address is as big as this. We use 8 groups of 4 hexadecimal digits. You can just look at the number of things here. The way with 4 bits, you can address 16 or 32 with 5 bits, or 64, 128, 254, 1028, and so on and so forth. What we teach in our digital things, you can imagine the kind of addresses you can generate using 8 groups of 4 digital hexadecimal numbers. Who knows, that may be inadequate for future, but at least thank God, with IPv6 coming, we're able to generate huge number of addresses and make our life easier. Yeah, in addition to all these heterogeneous properties, we have listed nothing about the heterogeneities in the real world, the physical world, the sensing techniques, the sensor nodes, the embedded system components. You don't know what hardware and voice somebody uses. I may use Cortex M3, you may use a Raspberry Pi, somebody else may use something else. Somebody may make it as an MSP 430 of Texas Instrument, and you don't know. You may use RT51, I may use the Contiki OS, somebody else may use some other operating system, and you don't know the router configuration, etc. So therefore, friends, I'm sure all of you will agree with me that IoT is truly heterogeneous. So therefore, it becomes more and more challenging to evolve with this. But to gain good things, you have to sweat a lot. But it is worth sweating for the applications what it can prove tomorrow. And to have IoT cybersecurity the stack, you can have it at the different levels. Either you can secure your device, it is called as device intelligence or edge processing or edge intelligence, or you can try to secure your communications using your device limited connections or messaging control. Or you can have some security in the cloud also, identification, authentication, encryption, decryption, etc. Or you can have remote control and update of devices, which is called as secure life cycle management. So therefore, this slide says that you can, it will demonstrate the 4 levels or the 6 layers at which you can provide security. In fact, for a high-end security, you need to have security mechanism at all the places, right? So it could be at the device level where you are securing your hardware, or you can secure your communication, or you can secure the cloud, or you can secure the whole life cycle management of that. So for high-end applications, we'll have to provide security at all these places. You can learn more about this at this particular slide called iotanalytics.com. You get, it's available in multiple parts. You can learn more about IoT security like blockchain, etc., etc. They have come to forum today to address the medical IoT system. Just to give an example, typical what are the threats, requirements, and possible solutions. So the security threats could be unverified and unauthorized access to your device, or information leakage wherein you cannot maintain the confidentiality, or tampering with message. So then that becomes an integrity issue. For example, let me say I'm wearing a wearable device and an insulin pump. My doctor sends an instruction to my insulin pump that is connected to the medical IoT system saying that you inject, some 10 units of insulin into Banu's body. If somebody tampers with that message, if the 10 becomes say 200, and this is a device who will just index 200, the problem we're going to face. Instead of saving a life could be at risk. So there will be a lot of hackers who will try to do this. So we can use a #25 function or #255 function and a digital signature, do a lot of encryption, decryption to secure your network. Or there could be denial of service, which is again a kind of an attack, which can be used to detect any intrusion or redundant routing. Or somebody can capture a node and behave as a faulty node, and you can create problems. Then routing attacks could be there, or intrusions and advanced security attacks could be there. So these are all the typical threats. What we see in our internet, obviously, because we use internet to make it as Internet of Things, all the things apply, but even they get more complicated because you have to provide security to the device also, right? Let me just give an example in which you can secure a device using what is called as a physically unclonable function for ensuring the physical security of a device. There is something called as a chip DNA. You can see here. What this slide is saying is that if I am wearing a wearable device that is connected to the Internet of Things, with my device, I'll use another IC, what is called as a DS28E50, which is called as a puff function that will ensure security. What it does is it will do the invasive and reverse engineering attacks that the hackers apply. Usually what hackers do is they try to code, reverse engineering they do. They try to know your password or try to access your device, etc. So this device will try to prevent that. How actually, what it does is the per device unique key is generated by the chip DNA circuitry, and only when needed for cryptographic operations, and is then instantaneously deleted. So there is no place where the security code or the password is stored there, so it will get immediately detected. So therefore, you can secure your device at the physical level itself, other than giving security at the various different levels of the Internet of Things, right? And most importantly, the chip DNA secure key never resides statically in the registers or memory, nor does it leave the electrical boundary of the IC. See, Because in the public domain, your code should not, leave the boundaries and give you problems, right? So this is just one example to tell you how you can secure the end device, and we called it as edge intelligence also, and your device becomes more and more secure. So friends, we spoke in two parts. Let me quickly conclude what I told. So to start with, I defined biomedical instrumentation, the way we connect biology to engineering principles to give better healthcare. Then we spoke about wearable sensors, the two applications of medical emergencies and rural healthcare. Then enablers and the typical 10 to 12 different features of the wearable sensor, which are quite different from the conventional sensors. Then I listed the typical parameters measured, the typical salts that are measured. Then I told that they're typically non-invasive in nature, so therefore we use body fluids like saliva, tears, sweat, and ISF to make the measurements. And also I gave some example for each of these sample to really demonstrate how well these devices have been developed. Then I looked at the components of a wearable system, in which you will have this sensors and the interfacing circuitry, then the smart embedded device, then a wireless communication protocol, etc., etc. Then I took some 2-3 interesting examples to demonstrate wearable sensors being developed. Then in the second part, we moved from wearable sensor to connected devices, and I spoke about the W bands and medical IoT systems after defining what is IoT. Then I spoke about 2 different applications of the elderly healthcare and taking care of our soldiers in the war field. Then I spoke about the impacts, applications, and advantages of the medical IoT systems. Then I gave an example of an end-to-end IoT system, and also listed the typical wireless communication protocols used in the medical IoT systems to provide better healthcare. Then I spoke to you about the importance of providing security and what are the challenges that are there. Huge number of challenges to make this. And the 6 different principles of the different layers at which you can provide security, starting from the device level to the highest level of the cloud security, etc. And then I just took one example of how do we provide device level security due to the time limitations. I just took one example, and that's about this particular presentation. I think I'm done with my presentation. Hope all of you enjoyed listening to this presentation. I'm more than happy to take any questions or any feedback on this. So sincere thanks to all of you for patient listening, which is assumed. And I'm Bhanu from BMS. For anything, you can just mail to me. I'll be more than happy to be in touch with you. So once again, thanks, Dr. Ravish, for the opportunity. If there are any questions, I can take. If there are no questions, thank you. Good day.